They called it a family meeting. But sitting there in our Lake Geneva mansion, surrounded by crystal chandeliers and fake smiles, I knew something was off. My brother Ethan got the company. My sister Ava got the lakefront estate. My younger brother Luke got 3 luxury cars. Then my mother slid a thin folder across the table toward me. Inside was a check for $39,000 and a note that read, "For your years with our family." I actually laughed. I thought it was a mistake, a bad joke. But when I looked up, no one was laughing. That's when she said it calm, precise, like she was reading a weather report. "You were never really one of us, Chloe." My heart stopped. In one breath, 30 years of belonging vanished. That night, I didn't cry over the money. I cried because I realized I had no idea who I really was. I can still see every detail of that afternoon. The scent of my mother's perfume, the quiet hum of the grandfather clock, the way the sunlight caught the edges of her diamond bracelet as she poured herself another glass of white wine. Patricia Monroe, the woman I had called Mom for 3 decades, looked perfectly composed, not a hair out of place, not a flicker of emotion. Across from her sat my father, Charles, silently stirring his drink. Ethan checked his smartwatch, already half thinking about quarterly profits. Ava smoothed her dress, always camera-ready for her next charity gala. Luke slouched, pretending to be bored, though I caught the flash of greed in his eyes. When my mother said, "Let's begin," I thought maybe we were talking about my father's retirement plan, or some charity trust. But then she opened the leather case and began sliding folders across the table. "Ethan, the company is yours," she said briskly. He grinned. "Naturally. Ava, the Lake Geneva property. And Luke, your father's cars." Then her gaze turned to me. For a moment, her hand hovered, as if she might change her mind. Then she pushed the final folder toward me. It was thinner than the rest. Inside, a single sheet of paper, a check for $39,000, and a note typed in stiff serif font, "For your years with our family." The air went out of the room. I waited for someone to laugh. No one did. "Is this some kind of mistake?" I asked. My voice cracked. "Where's the rest?" Patricia folded her hands. "There is no mistake, Chloe. There's something we've kept from you for your own good." She said it like a doctor delivering a terminal diagnosis. "You were adopted." The word didn't make sense at first. It just hung there, cold and unreal. "Adopted?" I repeated. "What are you talking about?" Charles finally looked up. "You were 3 months old. Your biological mother was a teenager who couldn't keep you. We gave you every opportunity, every comfort, except the truth," I snapped. Ethan shifted in his chair. "Mom, maybe this isn't the best way." "Enough," Patricia cut in sharply. "The Monroe Trust is bloodline only. It's out of our hands." Something inside me cracked. 30 years, I whispered. 30 years. And you're telling me this now? Over a check? She didn't flinch. "We thought it would be kinder. Kinder." The word echoed until it lost all meaning. I stood so fast my chair scraped the marble floor. "Keep your money," I said, my throat burning. "You've already taken everything that mattered." And before anyone could stop me, I walked out of that mansion, my so-called home, knowing I would never set foot in it again. I don't remember the drive home, just the rain, the blur of headlights, and the pounding in my chest that refused to stop. By the time I pulled into my apartment, my hands were trembling so hard I could barely turn the key. 30 years. 30 years of birthday dinners, family vacations, Christmas mornings, and it had all been a performance. I dropped the envelope on the counter like it was poison. The check fluttered out, landing face up under the kitchen light. $39,000. The price tag for my entire life. My phone buzzed. It was Mark, my boyfriend. "Hey, how'd the meeting go?" he asked casually. I laughed too loudly. "Turns out my family isn't really my family." "What do you mean?" "They told me I was adopted. Today. The same day they handed out the inheritance." Silence. Then, softly, "Jesus, Chloe." I sank to the floor, my back against the cabinets. "Do you know what my mom said? You were never really one of us. Like I was some stranger who'd overstayed her welcome." Mark's voice came through the speaker, low and steady. "Come here, please. You shouldn't be alone." But I couldn't move. I stared at the photo wall above my couch. Me in a graduation cap, Mom's arm around me, Dad clapping proudly in the background. My chest tightened. They had smiled for the camera, lied for the world, and called it love. When I finally crawled into bed, I didn't sleep. I replayed every memory that suddenly didn't belong to me. Mom teaching me how to bake lemon squares, Dad fixing my science projects, Ethan teasing me for being too soft. Maybe I'd always been too soft. Maybe that's why it hurt so much. By morning, the sadness had hardened into something else, anger. I made coffee and opened my laptop. I typed, "Private Investigator, Adoption Records, Milwaukee," into the search bar. The first name that came up was Jack Pritchard, retired detective. Reputation: relentless, discreet, expensive. Perfect. When he picked up, his voice was gravelly. "Pritchard Investigations. I need to find my birth parents," I said. "The adoption was private. Early 90 seconds. The Monroes handled it." "Monroe?" he repeated. "As in the Monroes?" "Yes." He whistled softly. "You're diving into deep water, sweetheart. Sometimes the truth's uglier than the lie. I'll take my chances." He paused. 200 a day, plus expenses. Done. As I hung up, I looked at the check still lying on the counter. For the first time, I didn't see shame. I saw fuel. They wanted to pay me off to disappear. But I was about to make sure the truth did the opposite. It would destroy their perfect little world. Jack Pritchard's office was exactly what I expected: old blinds, older coffee, and the faint smell of cigar smoke soaked into the walls. The sign on the glass door said Pritchard Investigations in peeling gold paint. He didn't stand when I walked in, just looked me up and down with eyes that had seen too much of everything. "So, you're the Monroe girl," he said. "Not anymore," I muttered, sitting across from his desk. He opened a folder filled with scribbled notes and yellowed printouts. "You were adopted in late 93. Private arrangement, no agency records. All handled by a Philadelphia lawyer named Jerome Blackwell. Ring a bell?" "No," I said. "My parents," I stopped myself. "The Monroes never mentioned a lawyer." "Didn't think so." He leaned back. "The file mentions a payment $40,000. Came from a holding company called Landon Enterprises. Offshore route, clean as snow. Someone paid a fortune to make sure this adoption stayed buried." My stomach clenched. "You're saying my biological parents were rich?" "Maybe. Or maybe someone powerful wanted you gone." I stared at the name on the paper like it was written in fire. Landon. I'd heard it before. Landon Enterprises was one of the biggest private investment firms in the country. Jack continued. "Your birth certificate lists your mother as Julia Bennett, age 19. No father listed. Address? A boarding house in Philadelphia. She disappeared 3 months after you were born." I swallowed hard. "Is she alive?" He shook his head. "Haven't found a trace yet. But I'll keep digging. You ready for that?" "What do you mean?" "Some people don't like their past being dug up, sweetheart. Especially the kind with bank accounts in the Caymans." I folded my arms. "You said you were relentless. Prove it." That earned me the faintest grin. "You've got fire. I like that. Give me 2 weeks." I nodded, slid an envelope of cash across his desk, and stood. "Chloe," he called as I reached the door. I turned. "When I find what you're looking for, it might not make you happy. I didn't know dated is bad. I didn't know dated ones. Not might nodes. I'm not looking for happy," I said. "I'm looking for real." As I stepped out into the cold Milwaukee air, the sun had already set, and the streets shimmered with rain. For the first time in my life, I wasn't anyone's daughter, sister, or heir. I was just a woman chasing a truth that had been bought and buried long before I learned to speak. And deep down, I already knew whatever Jack was about to uncover, it was going to change everything. 2 weeks passed like I was living in a fog. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped. Every shadow felt like a secret watching me. Then, one Thursday evening, the call came. Jack's voice was different this time, lower, strained. "Chloe, you sitting down?" I was standing in my kitchen, holding a mug I suddenly couldn't feel. "Just tell me, Jack." He hesitated. I could hear him exhale through the receiver. "Your biological father is Michael Landon." The mug slipped from my hands and shattered against the tile. For a moment, the name didn't register. But when it did, my knees almost gave out. "Michael Landon?" I whispered. "As in Landon Enterprises, the billionaire?" "The same one," he said quietly. I double-checked. "Your mother, Julia Bennett, was his intern." 19 years old. He was 27, married, and running his father's firm. I sank to the floor. No, no, that's impossible. It's not, Jack said. I found the payment records. He paid her to disappear, Chloe. $50,000 through a shell company. But here's what you need to hear: he knew where you ended up. He's known for 30 years. I pressed a trembling hand to my forehead. You mean he's been watching me? Indirectly. The Monroes were one of his business clients. He kept tabs. Probably thought he was protecting you from a scandal. Protecting me, I laughed. But it came out as a sob. He erased me. Jack went quiet. Then, softer. There's something else. Your mother left a letter. Before she died. My breath caught. She's dead? Passed away 5 years ago. Breast cancer. But she left instructions with a law firm in New York. If you ever came looking, they were to give you the letter. Tears blurred my vision. What does it say? I haven't read it, he said. But I spoke to the firm. It's addressed to you and to him. She wanted you both to know the truth. I wiped my face, my fingers shaking. I need that letter. I'll arrange it, Jack said. But Chloe, this next part won't be easy. You're about to meet a man who spent decades pretending you don't exist. I looked around my apartment, the check from the Monroes still pinned to my corkboard, the photo of me with the people who had lied my whole life. Everything I thought was mine had been a carefully curated illusion, paid for by a man who had tried to buy silence. And yet, somewhere deep down, I needed to see him. Not for his money, not even for answers, but because I needed to look him in the eye and ask one simple question. Why? That night, I found myself searching his name online. There he was, towering, polished, untouchable, smiling beside presidents, standing on magazine covers, attending charity galas, the kind of man people bowed to. But all I could see were his eyes, green, piercing, and achingly familiar. My eyes. The next morning I called Jack back. Set the meeting, I said. He hesitated. You sure about this? No, I admitted. But I can't live another day wondering who I am. When the call ended, I stared at the cracked mug still lying on the kitchen floor. For 30 years I'd believed I was the unwanted daughter of a family that never truly loved me. But now, I was the hidden daughter of a man the whole world admired. And somehow, that felt even worse. The Landon Tower rose over Chicago like a monument to arrogance. 50 stories of mirrored glass that caught the sunlight and threw it back at the city, daring anyone to look too long. I stood in the marble lobby, clutching Julia Bennett's letter like it was a weapon. My palms were sweating, my throat dry. I had rehearsed what I'd say 100 times, but now that I was here, all the words dissolved. The receptionist looked up. Do you have an appointment? Tell Mr. Landon his past is here to see him, I said. Her eyes widened, but she called upstairs. 10 minutes later, 2 security guards escorted me to the private elevator. The ride felt endless. When the doors finally opened, I stepped into a room that looked like a magazine spread dark walnut walls, a wall of glass overlooking the skyline, and behind a sleek desk sat Michael Landon. He looked up slowly, and in that instant, the world tilted. Those eyes green, sharp, familiar. Mine. Can I help you? His voice was deep, composed, rehearsed. I stepped forward, my heart hammering. I think you already know who I am. He frowned. I'm afraid I don't. Julia Bennett's daughter? I cut in. The pen slipped from his hand. He froze, color draining from his face. How did you find you? I said. Turns out money doesn't bury everything. He stood, straightening his jacket. You shouldn't be here. Neither should you have been in her bed, I snapped. The words echoed off the glass walls. For the first time, the billionaire didn't look untouchable. He looked human, cornered, aging, guilty. You don't understand, he said quietly. I was young, stupid. I made a mistake. A mistake? I stepped closer, slamming the letter onto his desk. You bought her silence. You bought my life. And you let strangers raise me while you pretended I didn't exist. He flinched. I made sure you had a good home. You mean you paid for one, I hissed. The Monroes. They weren't a family, they were a contract. His jaw clenched. You don't know what it was like back then. My marriage, my company, everything would have fallen apart. So you let her fall apart instead. He turned away, facing the skyline. For a long moment, all I could hear was the faint hum of the city below. "She loved you," he said finally. "Julia. She wanted to keep you, but she was terrified. She thought you'd hate her for what she did." I swallowed hard. "And what about you? Were you terrified too?" He didn't answer. I walked around the desk until I was standing beside him. I spent 30 years wondering why I didn't fit, why my mother looked at me like I was someone else's shadow. And now I know it's because I was. He turned to face me then, eyes glassy. "What do you want, Chloe?" "I want the truth," I said. "Not your money. Not your pity. Just the truth." He nodded slowly. "The truth is, I thought paying her off would make the problem disappear. But you didn't disappear. You grew up into someone who looks exactly like the one thing I tried to forget." The words stung, but there was something else beneath them: regret. I took a shaky breath. "I'm not here to ruin you. I'm here because I refuse to be a secret anymore." He rubbed a hand over his face. "You won't be." I hesitated. "You mean that?" He nodded, voice cracking. "You're my daughter. That's the truth. I can't undo the past, but I can stop hiding from it." We stood there in silence, father and daughter, strangers bound by 30 years of lies. When I left his office, the air outside felt sharper, cleaner, colder. For the first time, I wasn't just the girl who'd been disowned by one family. I was the woman who had forced another to face his sins. And somehow, that felt like power. 2 days after that meeting, my phone rang again. I almost didn't answer. When I did, his voice was softer than before, no longer the iron billionaire from the magazines, just a man who'd run out of excuses. "Chloe," he said. "I told them." I froze. "Told who?" "My family. My wife. My children. They know now." The words felt heavy, impossible. For 30 years I'd been invisible. Now I existed in a way that terrified me. He invited me to dinner at their home the following week. For 3 nights, I stared at the invitation on my counter. Then, against every instinct screaming, "No," I went. The Landon residence was everything you'd expect from old money. Marble floors, chandeliers, walls lined with art. But beneath all that polish, I felt something else: tension. When I entered the dining room, Rebecca Landon stood first. She wasn't what I expected. Graceful, elegant. Yes, but her eyes were kind. The kind of kindness that sees before it judges. She extended her hand. "You must be Chloe." "I must be," I said, trying to smile. Then came Ryan, their eldest, early 30s, all business and suspicion. He offered a stiff nod. No words. Ella, his sister, was the opposite, warm, curious, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You have Dad's eyes," she said softly. The table was set like something out of a movie. Crystal, linen, quiet music. But no one ate much. Every fork scrape felt deafening. Michael cleared his throat. "This is overdue," he began. "I made mistakes, ones I'll never undo. But Chloe deserves to know her family. All of it." Rebecca laid a hand on his. "We're glad you're here," she said gently. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure what I was feeling. Grateful, awkward, angry, all of it at once. When dessert came, Ella leaned closer. "So, what was it like, growing up with the Monroes?" I stared at my plate. "Like living in a museum. Beautiful things everywhere, but none of them were really yours." She reached out, touching my hand. "You are now." Something in me cracked open at that. After dinner, Rebecca walked me to the door. "He's been carrying this for decades," she said quietly. "Don't punish him forever. You were the best thing he ever gave the world, even if he was too cowardly to admit it." I wanted to believe her. Driving home that night, the city lights blurred through my windshield. My life had split into 2 timelines, one filled with lies, and one trembling with truth. And I realized something strange. For the first time in my life, I wasn't looking for belonging anymore. I was looking for peace. 6 months later, the headlines hit. Monroe Industries declares bankruptcy after losing Landon contract. I stared at the news alert on my phone, coffee going cold in my hand. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. It was something darker, an ache that sat between justice and grief. An hour later, Ethan called. His voice was frantic. "Chloe, it's bad. Mom's losing everything. She's blaming you, says you turned Landon against us." I laughed, but it sounded hollow. You mean the same Landon whose money she took for 30 years? The man who paid for the lie she lived in? He didn't answer. I heard him exhale shakily. She wants to talk to you. I have nothing left to say to her. But that night, I got the call anyway. The number I had deleted twice lit up my phone. Against my better judgment, I answered. Chloe. Just hearing her voice sent a chill through me. Mother, I said flatly. There was a pause, then a sob she tried to hide. You destroyed us. No, I said softly. You destroyed me. You just didn't notice until it started costing you money. How dare you? How dare you? I cut in. You looked me in the eye for 30 years and lied. You let me believe I was one of you. You let me love you. And now that the lie has fallen apart, you want to blame me for the truth? Her silence was worse than shouting. Finally, she said. You think this makes you better than us? You're still a mistake, Chloe. I always were. You always were. I took a breath that felt like swallowing glass. Then maybe it's time that mistake learned to live without you. And I hung up. For the first time in months, I cried not out of anger but release. A few days later, I drove back to the Lake Geneva estate one last time. The mansion looked hollow, its windows dark, the gardens overgrown. A for sale sign leaned against the front gate. Through the iron bars, I could see the fountain in the courtyard dry and cracked, the marble chipped. The same place we used to take family photos every summer. I thought of the girl I used to be, standing there in her white dress, smiling for a family that never truly saw her. Now she was gone. As I stood there, a voice called from behind me. Thought I'd find you here. It was Jack Pritchard, hands shoved in his coat pockets, looking older, softer somehow. Heard the Monroes finally went under, he said. You okay? I don't know, I admitted. It doesn't feel like victory. It just feels empty. He nodded. Truth does that. It burns everything down before you can rebuild. We stood there in silence for a moment, watching the sunset glint off the dead fountain. You know, he said, your mom, Julia, she'd be proud of you. She didn't want revenge. She wanted freedom. Looks like you finally found it. Maybe he was right. When I got back to the city, Michael called. His voice was steady. I saw the news. You didn't do this, Chloe. They did it to themselves. But I'm sorry anyway. For what? I asked. For not being there when you needed someone. For letting you grow up thinking love was something you had to earn. And the Furkais? It is Osters. I swallowed hard. It's strange. The family that lied to me lost everything. And the father who abandoned me is the one trying to make it right. That's how life works, he said quietly. Sometimes the truth gives back what the lie stole. When the call ended, I looked out over the city skyline. For the first time, I didn't feel small under it. The Monroes had fallen. The lie was dead. And somehow, that gave me room to breathe. I wasn't just the secret daughter anymore. I was the woman who had survived the truth and learned to live inside it. A year has passed since the day everything fell apart, and strangely, it feels like that's when my real life began. I kept the $39,000 check. Not in a bank, not in a drawer, but framed above my desk at the Bennett Foundation, the nonprofit I founded for young women facing unplanned pregnancies. The brass plate beneath it reads, "The price of truth is worth more than the cost of lies." Every morning, I look at it and remember what that money was supposed to mean. Payment to disappear, to stay silent, to accept a version of love that came with conditions. Instead, I turned it into my beginning. Michael, my father, kept his word. He didn't try to buy me a life this time. He simply became part of mine. He visits the foundation every month, quiet and humble, carrying coffee and files like any other volunteer. When people recognize him, he just smiles and says, "I'm here for my daughter." Rebecca joins sometimes too. Ella calls me every week. Even Ryan, the one who could barely look at me that first dinner, sent a donation last month with a handwritten note. "Welcome to the family, Chloe. I do sen. Koppen has not of sot." Mark and I got married last spring. We kept it small, no photographers, no spectacle. Michael walked me down the aisle, hands trembling, tears he didn't try to hide. Rebecca hugged me afterward and whispered, "You have your mother's grace." She didn't mean Patricia Monroe. She meant Julia Bennett, and that's who I carry with me now, the young woman who was silenced, who refused to let her daughter grow up without truth. Sometimes I drive past the old Monroe mansion. The new owners painted it white, Planted roses along the walkway. It's beautiful again, but it isn't mine. It never was. My home is smaller, warmer, filled with people who know my story and love me anyway. I used to think the truth destroyed me, but it didn't. It rebuilt me piece by piece, scar by scar into someone stronger, freer, realer than I ever was before. Because in the end, family isn't who gives you their name, it's who gives you their heart.